We can also multiply involving complex numbers. When we multiply these, we remember, or in this particular one where I have one term multiplying two terms, I'm distributing across both of those terms. Boy, doesn't this look familiar? Seems like we've done this before. Yeah, the operation, the actual technique isn't changing from when we've worked with problems similar before, except these just have i's maybe rather than x's. So we're kind of doing the same process. So this becomes, if I were to distribute it out, 4i times the 3 minus the 4i times, in this case, whoops, 4i times the 3. I didn't write that 3 in there, did I? 4i times the 3 minus, there, that's much better, 4i times a 5i. There's my distribution. Now I can multiply this out. I can multiply real times real, so this becomes a 12i minus 4i times 5i. That gives me a negative 20i squared. Almost done, but we might recognize that I squared can reduce. Because remember earlier, we talked about I squared equals negative 1. So this is really 12i minus 20 times a negative 1. 12i, sorry, I just got a lot of little 12i, so 12i plus a 20 is my result. And typically I like putting the real part first, so I'll rewrite them around. So this becomes 20 plus 12i. So the thing to watch out for is maybe in your multiplication, you're going to get an I squared. Remember then, when that happens, the I squared is the same thing as a negative 1. So feel free, drop in that negative 1 and go from there. All right, let's look at another one. 7 minus 3i times minus 2 minus 5i. What do you think we're going to do with this one? Well, it's FOIL, so I want to make sure I do all my distributions. And then multiply those out. So 7 times a negative 2 produces a negative 14. 7 times a negative 5i gives me a negative 35i. The inner terms, a positive 6i. And the outer terms, a plus 15i squared. Simplify, combine like terms. So minus 14. Negative 35i plus a 6i gives me a negative 29i. Plus 15 I squared is a negative 1. So negative 14 minus 29i minus a 15. Collect my like terms. So I have negative 14 and negative 15. It gives me a negative 29 minus a 29i. And there's my result. That was a kind of ugly way of writing it. Let me try to write it better over there for you. Minus 29 minus 29i. Again, process fairly straightforward. The only thing we're including now is how to work with an imaginary unit. And so far, our technique seems to be real similar as we've worked with previous terms that might have been a binomial, a term that included a variable in that. The only distinction is if we get an I squared, remember, we can substitute that in for a negative 1, and that allows us to continue to simplify.